In this episode, I sit down with Rachit Kataria. Rachit is the co-founder and CEO of Centralize. Now, if you haven't seen this technology, you have got to go check this out. Centralize is an AI-powered relationship intelligence platform for enterprise sales teams. The pitch is all about multi-threading and being more efficient in your deals and not having to do all the clerical and tedious work that goes into building org charts and designing account plans and all those different things. We took the conversation in a bunch of different directions. We cover everything from his background working at Meta and then moving into an early stage startup of his own, the process of getting through Y Combinator, and then how he launched the product and went to market, getting their first customers. This was a really great conversation, and I am super long on what Rachit and his team are building at Centralize. So check it out. This is Sales Players, and I'm your host, Jesse Woodbury. I've spent my career selling for early stage companies, and now I'm on a mission to help reps and operators find tips, strategies, and resources for generating more pipeline, closing more deals, and building wealth in tech sales. To learn more, visit salesplayers.co. All right, and we are live. So I want to welcome Rachit Kataria, founder of Centralize, to Sales Players. How's it going, man?
It's good. Good to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. I was telling you off air that I always love talking to founders because for me, I just always have a million questions for founders. And, it's so crazy to launch something and bring something to market for the first time.
Totally.
And in your case, it's a newer category, right? You're not launching necessarily something in a super established niche. And so I want to get into how you started your business and how you've launched. But before we do that, I think a helpful place for listeners to get up to speed on you and your career is tell us how you got your start.
Sure. Yeah. First off, yeah, I'm Rachit. Thanks for having me here, Jesse. It's a good time. How did I get my start? So you'll find out very soon in the product's go-to-market space, but I've always been an engineer by trade. So a little bit of an adjacent kind of outside in. Wouldn't really say I'm a seller by any means. But here we are, founding AE, CEO, whatever you want to call me at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did my actually undergrad master's in CS at USC. Was in LA for a while. I grew up in the Bay Area actually, from San
Nice.
Jose, so close to home now. I'm also in Upper Bay Area, kind of near San Francisco. But yeah, at SC actually, crazy enough, my first week of college, I met my co-founder, and
Oh,
so
no way.
very glad that we had that happen. Will's amazing. We actually met at our school's entrepreneurship club. So full circle over a decade later, here we are building a company.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's wild that even, it goes back so far. But yeah, part of the start was, just being an engineer that was focused on product. So being that person on the ground that actually cared about customers on the other side, as close as possible to the end user of the product. And so after college, I actually went to Meta, and I was a founding engineer on Facebook Shops, which was Meta's big e-commerce push during COVID.
Nice.
Fun, pretty insane journey. We launched May 2020, small tiger team. Stock jumped 5% that day. It was cool. Made billions of dollars in the enterprise value, which is an exciting milestone. But then we scaled to like 250,000,000 monthly active users in a year. Pretty insane, building
Wow.
rare and seller side there. And then I went to a YC company called A2B, which was a fuel card for trucking, like literally a Visa card to buy gas for fleets. And I used to literally go to truck stops and company HQs with the AEs and CSMs, giving out the cards
Wow.
and tech. And kind of like the seller, if you will, a supporter outside in as the engineer, I very quickly saw when you actually understood the story of the relationship. If you knew what the CFO cared about, that was different than what the fleet manager cared about versus the driver. Very smooth. Everyone felt like they were heard, problem solved. Is a very clean process. And then there's cases where we had potentially, 6-figure deals dropping out of the blue that in reality were, surprise, surprise, a champion that left a month ago. The new person that came in that didn't have any context on the priorities, the context about the deal in a gong call hiding 6 months back, the AE out of office. It's just all of this context that you need.
Right.
If you don't have a handle on it, no matter how much I spend time trying to build code to fix the problem and what they needed, it was too late. You lose that trust, that credibility, that foot in the door, and then you're gone because we weren't multi-threaded. And that's really the crux of the product. It's what we came to the conclusion on was, hey, deals are won not at the account, but the individual level. Each person matters. At the end of the day, all you're trying to solve is, who am I talking to? who am I not talking to and who I should be if I have any chance of getting to the finish line here, right? Uh, and that was a lot of what I saw outside in as kind of an engineer working closely with go-to-market teams. Maybe last thing I'll say, just because I think
Yeah.
it's amazing. Like Will, my co-founder, he actually created Slack huddles after college, so he was one of the engineers that worked with the
That's
founding
awesome.
team. Yeah, we worked very closely with Cal Henderson, who's their co-founder, CTO, Noah Weiss, amazing guy, he's their CPO at the time. And yeah, scale that product, fastest growing product to reach 1 million users internally.
Wow.
And he said the exact same thing, but at Slack scale. Go to market did not have context on who cared about this at scale, who should we plug into, where are we multi-threaded. It's so horizontal. Which function should bring in this product and adopt it? And
Yeah.
so we just came together and we're like, you know what? We've seen this enough. We know relationships are so key. Where do we, help not just sales, but all of go to market? Engineers like ourselves that need to understand the story.
Yeah.
Where does
Yeah.
everyone come to and have that shared understanding of their relationship? So that's a little bit of a long story
Wow.
short on
No, this is
that.
great. Perfect background. And quick question. I know we already talked about this, but what year did you leave Meta? Because we might have crossed paths. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
Meta's a huge company, so we wouldn't have necessarily crossed paths. But for listeners, as a reminder, the company I worked for, Customer with a K, CRM help desk product got acquired by Meta in 2022. And I was there, basically from 22 to 23 until they decided to carve our business back out. And when I was there, I was in the business messaging org, which is where like WhatsApp and Instagram Messenger live. So not necessarily on the shop side. And then later they moved us to like the platform, I think was the other org we rolled up into before they carved us out. But yeah, when did you leave there? I'm curious if we ever could have exchanged workplace messages during our times.
Possibly. So I joined January 2020 and I left just around May 22. So we might have maybe overlapped.
Barely a couple months. Yeah, because I think
Yeah.
I came in at like February or March of 22.
Okay, so probably like a month or two that I could have hit you up in workplace. But
So let me ask this, because I've had some raised eyebrows when I went from being at Meta. I had a great experience there overall, and I wish I could have stayed longer. I understand there was business things out of my control that led to our carve out from Meta, but a lot of people have raised eyebrows because I've since gone from Meta back down to early stage startups.
yeah.
And I can only imagine a lot of people, mentors, family members, friends, were like, Ratchet, what are you doing? You're going from a FANG company to a Y Combinator backed basically bootstrapped. I mean, there's very minimal capital that goes into a Y Combinator company at first. And now you're going to go do this whole thing where you're going out and you're doing account management. Like, what is this? Did you get a lot of pushback on that decision? Like, hey, why aren't you just going to go to Microsoft? You've been at Meta now. Let's go to Microsoft next or wherever. But did that happen, or were people pretty pumped that you were going down into these early companies?
I definitely think there was some pushback for sure. I'd like to say, the traditional classic route is you do well in college, you end up at FANG, you grow quickly, you scale up over there. Obviously, they pay very well, like life's good. I've always wanted to found long term. And so actually at Meta, I'd set a very explicit goal for myself, which was in 2 years, let's get to senior engineer and do whatever it takes to become a really quality engineer there. Build the right skill sets, understand how to work well in teams, have that level of visibility in projects that impact the org. And I was able to get there in 2 years, which is really exciting. And thanks to so much support from my managers over there and team members and amazing folks I worked with. And as soon as I got to that point, it was kind of a blinders off moment. Like we're heads down. What now is out there that we could potentially be working on? And because my eventual goal was to build something as a startup, I thought, well, the natural next step maybe isn't necessarily to go dive in head first, but at least to be in an environment where I can learn from the founders, have even heightened ownership as an engineer, but get really close to those product people problems, thinking about design, about hiring, about people management, all the things that are not just coding every single day. Especially if I'm going to take on that role as a founder, we have to wear all the hats, right? And with my co-founder too. So that was really the mentality, which was, okay, Meta, obviously massive $1 trillion company. Why don't we go maybe a little bit smaller? Series B seems reasonable. maybe not quite all the way down to the ground, but in a place where, 100 or so folks, I get to interface with the founders on a daily basis. I get to own a core critical pillar. I mean, I was the product tech lead for a year and a half over there and kind of led all things related to the product development of the core mobile app. And more importantly for me, it was taking walks with the founders down the Embarcadero every other week
Yeah.
and hearing
Wow.
about all the other problems about how are we thinking about hiring right now? What's the situation on the people side? What's the product roadmap looking like? And how is that influenced by what we're thinking through from what the AEs and CSMs are seeing on the ground? Uh, how do you lead an org as an effective leader in terms of inspiring confidence and trust?
Yeah.
Your weekly one-on-ones and Q&As. So all the things where, yes, it was great having the leadership ownership on the manager side, but for where we are now, building Centralize and being the founders, uh, all the things I would never learn if I just stayed at Meta. And that was
Yeah.
really the core decision there. I mean, I can say for a fact, if I had not gone to A to B, I would not be anywhere near the, you know, quality of founder. Not saying that that's, amazing right now. We're still working on it, but anywhere near that had I not had those experiences. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I love it. So one of the biggest questions I get from listeners of the show is, should I go invest in big career track, or should I go
Right.
startup? And as someone who's similar to you has done both, most of the bigger companies I was at through acquisition, I was at a unicorn several years back that was pre-IPO,
Mhm.
and then Meta via acquisition. But I love to tell this story when I interview for jobs or when I talk on the podcast about the fact that I've seen lots of different perspectives.
Mm.
Because in your case, for example, you saw what crazy success looks like at the scale of Facebook Meta, 75,000 person company, tons and tons of revenue,
Amazing.
like just huge household name brand. And so that's a unique experience. But now you've also seen what it's like to make the sausage in an early stage company, right? Like what goes into getting those early customers and how you deal interpersonally with a small team of people, like you said, less than 100 people, usually in a Series B. And now you're the founder and you're even more in the grassroots, like get the message out there, be an evangelist. And so my advice to people is typically like try to do a little bit of everything, just like what you
Yeah.
did, which is, find a path, get some time in a big company because it's great to see what success looks like at scale. But I value a lot my experiences in early stage companies, and that's why I've
Totally.
ultimately orbited back to a very early stage company where I work now. And then I do sales players, which is more of a weekend side business. But I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a founder myself, and I try to get into that headspace. And so I've gotten to experience, again, the FANG world, but then also like what it's like to try to launch something from the ground up and get something off the ground, and then everything in between, which is growth series, Series B. And for me, I always tend to come back to like the Series B, Series C stage, or sometimes earlier, but it's because I like to feel like I'm making an impact.
Yeah.
I like to
Cool.
feel like my ideas ultimately get heard by the leadership team. And so, why I would encourage anyone listening out there who has even an inkling of wanting to work in a startup, or if someday they want to own their own business or be an entrepreneur, to just give it a shot. And the way you did it, I think, is perfect because it was a ramp down from FANG down to somewhere in between. And then now you're on the ground floor as the founder launching a full brand and product. And so I think that was a really good way to sort of step back into, move your way into that world. So kudos to you. What a killer career so far. And you're just getting started. I mean, Centralize is
Really
just
did.
barely getting launched. When actually did you guys officially launch the product?
Yeah, so we actually did Y Combinator last year, from January
Okay.
through April. Amazing experience. My co-friend and I were in San Francisco together, living in the same apartment, 2 beds. We would basically just stay in the living room together, see each other from 8 a.m. until 2 a.m., sleep for 6 hours, and then see each other again in the morning. It was a really, really productive time, that's for sure. If one thing YC helps you do well, it's the environment of just maximum heads to the ground grinding.
Yeah. Tell listeners, a lot of people listening may not be familiar with YC.
Yeah.
How does the whole program work? I know there's a pretty extensive application process. It's very competitive. I know previously they did a few batches basically per year, but I think they're scaling that up now and they're going to be
Yeah.
doing quarterly batches.
Yep.
How much money do they give you ultimately to start things, or do they give you a check, or is it more of an incubator type system?
Yeah, they do. They do. So what helps a
Yeah.
ton is, having the activation energy, if you will, to say, hey, we now have funding from YC. They have what they call a standard deal. It's across every single company. I'm pretty sure I remember these stats, right? It's 125K for 7% of the company, and the remaining 375, that's almost a front loaded amount that they give you that then ties into when you raise your seed later on. So imagine you now have an idea, have a vision, ideally have a little bit of traction, and you have 500K to go after the races.
Nice.
Scale.
Okay.
And that's really what you get in those 4 months. And that's just the financial side. I think that's arguably the least important thing they give you. The most important is the community. It's people that are in the
Yeah.
exact same boat, thinking about the same problems about hiring and scalability and talking to customers and all the things you have to grapple with as you're in the idea maze. And then getting to the point where ideally by the end of it, if you've sprinted and got into, the sense of paying customers that see the value, see the vision, they're on your side, they're ready to scale. Yeah, you have a story to tell at demo day, which was in April, which is kind of that
That's so
mass
awesome.
exodus of investors coming in to say, who do we want to pick and back as a company?
Remind me, do you have to live in a specific place? Do they make you move to the Bay Area? If you're like, let's say you're launching a company in Arizona or Texas or something, do you have to move to San Francisco or one of the coastal cities, or can you live anywhere and they'll, you just fly in for demo day and stuff?
I think at this point, given it's now far enough post-COVID, it would pretty much be an in-person requirement.
In
Well, in
person,
San
got it.
Francisco, they're very bullish on all in SF.
Yeah, fair enough. And they're not wrong. I think that's a safe bet. And
Right.
there's a power in being together and in person and having like you said, like
Totally.
having access to other founders who are doing it, in person, right?
Yeah.
And something that comes up a lot on the podcast is we're in this world now where there's a lot of remote work. I'm remote now.
Mhm.
But I spent the first, 7 years of my career living in Austin, Texas, working in early stage companies for the most part
Yeah.
in an office. And I always talk about how early on in my career, I actually sat next to our founder and CEO.
Nice.
And that was a super transformational experience for me, one that I can't even replicate today. Even though I have a pretty tight relationship with the founder I work for now, I'm still not in the same city as her, so I can't just go and plop down at her desk and ask a bunch of questions. I can try to call her on Slack or whatever, we're using Slack huddles.
Nice.
But it's much harder to do. And so I always try to encourage listeners, when you get a chance to be in person, I think, you obviously are in California already, but like having that opportunity to be in person with other founders, with the advisors that YC sets you up with.
Mhm.
There's so much power in being in person. And I know it's, there's an appeal to remote work also, and I'm a big fan of it as well. But I think if you're early in your career and you're still trying to build a name for yourself and a brand for yourself, one of the best ways to do that is to go and move to a city like San Jose, San Francisco, Austin, New York, and the list goes on,
Totally.
and get where the people that are doing the thing that you ultimately want to do are. And if that's tech, it's probably San Francisco, maybe New York, maybe Austin, maybe Seattle or something, but like go and get yourself to one of those places, because even just 5 years in a place like that, like the connections in Rolodex that I built in Austin are still paying me dividends, even though I don't live there anymore. So I can see why, full circle here, I can see why YC would want that to be an in-person experience, because they're going to be able to add more value to their, portfolio founders with those in-person experiences.
Totally. Some of the best learnings we've had during the batch were these happenstance conversations at the bar with another founder, something we overlooked that they talked to us about.
Yeah.
All these different little things that you don't expect. And then when they do, it's like, oh, in hindsight, wow, had we not had that conversation, maybe we would have been building a different product right now. So it's I like to say maximizing your surface area of luck and just being in the right rooms gets you that.
All right, so you're Rachit and Will, and you've just got a $500,000 check from YC. What do you do first? Because it sounds like a big part of the runway is like, let's go figure out who our customers are. Let's go figure out how to land our first round of customers.
Sure.
Break that down for us. And I think a lot of listeners, most of my listeners work in the revenue sales category.
Yeah.
Whether that's early SMB companies or all the way up the chain to strat and enterprise reps. But I know everyone always wants to know, like, how do you got 500K, investment. How do you take that and turn that into paying customers quickly?
Yeah, totally. The one thing I'll emphasize actually is I think the money is actually the last thing to even worry about. It's great to have, and I call it that activation energy because it gives you at least confidence to have something to depend on before you completely quit your job and have no salary. It's or at least a bit of a buffer to not feel like you're going to go, if you have a mortgage, basically go bankrupt, right? Or have to pay your apartment rent at least. But I think more importantly, it's how can you have such focus in your mind on what are actual real problems that you can go and solve? Where, great, the 500K at least gets you to the point where you don't have to worry about that anymore. You're stable in life. You have your basic necessities covered. Now, how do you go all in 12, 15 hours a day, just talking to as many people as you physically can that are willing to make the time of day for you as a random person out of the blue that really have no reason to help out other than out of the goodwill of their heart, and you're building something and trying to make something work. And we did that the entire batch. We were talking to as many VPs of, at the time, actually, it was more on the post sales side. We've actually since moved across the stack. So pre sales and post sales. So,
Wow.
AEs, AMs, CSMs. But we were every single day of the week. A good week looked like 9 to 5. We were just talking to as many AEs, CSMs, VPs of sales, VP of success, CROs that we possibly could, and just picking their brain on what's wrong these days. What are you stressing out about? What's hard? What do you wish could be solved? With the undertone of, hey, for the first time, a company that Will and I can build can be powered by AI and actually solve use cases that were not possible before. Until GPT 4.0 came out on the scene roughly when we started. Sorry, 4.0 came out later, but GPT 4 when it came out started unlocking things that you truly couldn't do and build a company around until January of that year, of last year. So it was combining those, getting as close to the real problems that we had. And actually, one of the harder things was, we're technical. We're actually engineers by trade. We could go the route, I would say incorrect route, of trying to just build the first thing that comes to mind. When in reality, the right thing you should be doing, kind of like sales, right? Everyone that's listening, it's you want to be the trusted advisor. You want to understand their pains, make someone feel heard, build the relationship, and then actually show them how you can solve that problem. I like to think of founding as the exact same way. It's not, hey, let's, slap you with the solution day one and hope that's what you need. It's understanding what you need that actually solves your problems and what those are, and then tailoring what you have to actually getting there. And making sure we were very mindful of that throughout the entire process.
Yeah. I know Jason Limkin from SaaStr always says you should talk to at least 20. If you're founding a company, you should talk to at least 20 prospective customers minimum, minimum, to just have the conversations. And that, in some cases can turn into your sales pipeline, basically. Because if you go out and find 20 target companies and you have conversations with all 20, some percentage, it may not be even 40%, but it may be some percentage of those will ultimately become sort of customer partners and roadmap partners for you. Is that how you and Will approached it? Or did you use, industry network connections or intros from somebody like your investors? How did you start building that list of, call it, and I'm imagining you probably had more than 20 conversations, it sounds like, but yeah, how did you go about building the list of targets to tackle?
Yeah. I think everything you described is spot on. We did all the above. I mean, at the time, we didn't have investors. We'd raised our seed round shortly after YC, so that we started leading on that much later. I'd say June, July of last year. But in the beginning, it was we're engineers. We're not coming from sales backgrounds. We're not coming from having an entire network of AEs and VPs of sales and all these people we could lean on. So the next best thing was friends of friends that might be in the space, right? And picking their brains, and then truly just cold LinkedIn outreach. Say, hey, founder in the space, heard great things about you, been seeing what you've been putting out there, think you'd have a really good perspective on what we're building. Any chance you have 20 minutes just to share your thoughts and give us the time of day? And thankfully, GTM is a pretty, I like to think, giving space, and they're willing to give you time if you kind of frame it the right way. And so that was super helpful in the early days of just picking as many leaders' brains as possible. I mean, at this point, a little over a year into doing this, we probably talked to at least 150, 200 VPs of sales, CROs, leadership, and of course, folks on the ground like AEs and AM, CSM. So if you're not enjoying talking to your customer, you shouldn't be building a company.
Wow. So y'all blew way past the 20 minimum. Good for you guys for just hustling and getting those conversations going. And I agree. GDM tends to be a space where people are willing to hop on and talk and network. And I think historically it's been somewhat of an underserved category in tech in comparison to something like DevOps or cloud or some of these other tools, even MarTech and other tools tend to have, historically have had a lot more saturation, or they've had a lot more options and emphasis. But sales GDM has been old school for a long time. Even in my own career, I've been selling, tech now for 13 years.
Right.
But in that 13 years, things have changed pretty intense. Like outreach didn't exist when I started my sales career. Sales loft outreach, these were not things that people used when I first started in tech sales. There was no gongs or claries. There was
Right.
no like tools like that. So the space has come a very long way in a very short amount of time.
Mhm.
But I think that's due to people, like you said, being willing to have the conversation and wanting to use technology to make
Yeah,
the job easier. It's a hard job, and the right tech can really make a huge difference.
totally. I mean, that's where we're coming from too. We outside in could see how hard it is to do this job well. I mean, the very simple math, I posted about this earlier, but a lot of what we think about is how do you operationalize multi-threading? How do you think at scale of how to maintain relationships in sales? It's so critical, especially if you're mid-market enterprise strat sales. Like that's the non-negotiable, if you will, for breaking into accounts. And if you just do the simple math, maybe you have 50 ops each job. Potentially you're talking to get to the right people. It might have taken you 15, 20, 30 people to eventually get through across procurement and marketing and sales, and whoever you're talking to is a persona. That in of itself, 50 times, let's say 30, is literally what, 1,500 people that you might have
Yeah.
to think about.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
insane. That's just for one initial swap of people that you're thinking through across all of your accounts. Now imagine the leader one level up that has 10 folks that they're managing, and all of a sudden you're talking
Mhm.
about 15,000 relationships in flight that you just have to make sense of as an organization. Like,
Yeah.
numbers get pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And we think there's so much better ways to do it, especially what AI can do these days. And so that's why we're here. We're here to we get excited about solving.
So let's imagine that I just bought the product, Centralize, and
Sure.
I'm rolling it out to my sales team. I have a pretty small sales team here, but let's just let's assume I work for a company that has like 15 sellers, right, or 20
Sure.
sellers. We just purchased with you. We're ready to go. What does day one on the product look like? Like, give me the kind of implementation
Sure.
process and change management. Like, what things do I? And let's just assume, for this sake, which I am an enterprise account executive, I'm just going to be a
Yeah.
user. I'm not an admin or anything like that. How does my workflow change as a result? I'd love to hear this.
Totally. Totally. Well, first off, I'll say actually, we have some amazing customers on board that have 3 reps, 5 reps. Like, as long as you're selling up market, we generally think Centralize is a very powerful tool for that workflow. Mid-market enterprise strat sales. And so if I'm Jesse today, I wake up, I have Centralize. The core of the platform, I like to use the tagline, is we're the R in your CRM if it actually worked,
Oh,
right?
I love that.
It's the relationship layer. Salesforce, I mean, ironically, if anyone's listening, hey team, they were a lead investor from last year. So you guys already know this, but you're a very powerful database. It's amazing. You have contacts, ops, and accounts. But if I'm Jesse, where do I wake up and see from all the touch points I've ever had, from the gong calls, the emails, the Slack messages, the calendar events, where actually are we in this deal? Who have I talked to? From every word that individual has spoken, because we talked about deals around at the individual level.
Mm-hmm.
What does each individual care about that's different person to person? That's an AI recap of every sentence just that person has ever said. So now we're at who we've talked to, we've at what they care about, but now being able to visualize on a graph automatically a relationship map of what does that mean? Am I multi-threaded? Am I above the power line? Am I below?
Mm-hmm.
Am I in the right functions? And that just creates itself automatically. So maybe Jesse a month ago, in the best case, would probably have to go make a PowerPoint for the top 5 accounts, drawing boxes, copying LinkedIn URLs in, reporting hierarchies. Oh,
I'm literally doing that. Like, I was literally doing that this morning. So yeah,
like,
that's how I've historically done it. Sales Navigator has made that a little easier because I can go and save my prospects and build an org chart in Sales
right.
Navigator. It's still really buggy. LinkedIn, if you're listening, fix that, because Sales Nav is so buggy. That org chart capability is really cool, but it's still very manual, to your point. Like, it's not an automated thing. It's me manually going to LinkedIn and looking up every profile. It's funny because last week I set a demo with a large finance company,
Yeah.
and then they invited like 20 different people to this demo session from a ton of different disciplines and orgs
Yeah.
within their
Yeah.
company. And so I had to manually go through and look at everyone who accepted the calendar invite, look them up on LinkedIn, figure out who they were, see what their role was, go and take their picture from LinkedIn and put it on a slide so I could give it to my solutions engineer before the demo. So he knows how to tailor the demo presentation
Yeah.
to speak to the breadth of the people that were involved. So yeah, it's very manual. It's been, and it historically has been.
Oh man. Yeah, I feel you on that. Fortunately, you're not alone. That is kind of the old quotes there.
Yeah, pretty standard.
Pretty standard. Here's what it would look like with Centralize. We can make it very
Yeah, let's hear.
simple. You would wake up, You'd have that account already pulled in automatically from Salesforce, bidirectionally syncing, and your map, as soon as a calendar event comes in, an email, a gong call, in this case, those 20 people that showed up, every single person would get automatically enriched, their title, their background, their email, and they would literally show up on the map in exactly which function and seniority they fall into. And you can click in, you can see their background, their work history, very coming soon, LinkedIn posts about what they've talked about if they've been active online.
Very cool.
And you just have the entire story that you, team selling, right? Your solutions engineer, your potentially anyone else on the team, your SDRs or BDRs, more importantly, your frontline manager up to your C-suite, if that's a really critical deal. That entire story is now a shared view that automatically creates itself throughout the entire deal cycle. That is what you get from Centralize automatically. You would never have to touch a PowerPoint in your life again.
Okay, we seriously need this because I spend way too much time, and it's funny. Some of my closest connections know this. They're like, "Oh, Jesse's like a he spends however much percentage of my time is spent on PowerPoints," and those in my mind are revenue generating activities because to close a big strategic deal, you have to have the multi-threading. You have to have peering. For example, I'm working with another company right now where they brought their executives in. I had to go and prep my whole executive team on that conversation before the meeting happened. And usually that's done with PowerPoints and trying to go to LinkedIn and send people profiles and stuff. But these are the revenue generating activities that get me the deals that I need to get done on the enterprise level. And this sounds so cool to have it on. I love the idea of having all their LinkedIn content feed into there as well, because I also will separately go to Sales Nav and I'll look at my prospects and try to see what they've posted recently to find relevant ways I can do outreach. I'm guessing it maps out the companies they came from, because what we're finding in my role right now is a lot of our former customers, folks that have moved on from our customers, go to new companies and then they come back to us. And I know there's a handful of tools in the market that are specialized just in that, but that's an incredibly valuable thing, because one of the best ops I'm working on right now is because the main point of contact, the champion, came from one of our customers, went to this new company, and then she came back and said, "I want to work with you guys again." So that's a hugely powerful thing too, is being able to look and say, "Hey, this person who, we haven't even met yet, who's going to be some, random IT person that's joining an upcoming call on InfoSec, worked at one of our customers 5 years ago," and we can make that connection and, see if they had any exposure to our product before. Right. So that's super cool.
That's actually something that you're kind of reading my mind on our roadmap. Think of ourselves as the marriage between CRM, LinkedIn, and conversational data for the first time. And to your point, what you'd actually get in the product is everyone that you've ever talked to or that's showing up that you can now automatically see. People that you can proactively also pull in, right? Like what about strategically? Like who else do I know I want to get to when I'm building out a view, and having a place to do that, to show that to your enterprise, SDR, BDR, solutions eng, leadership, anybody to look at. Here's a very critical piece. Why PowerPoints suck too is in a month, by the time you finish that, it's stale. Somebody in that tree just left, right? They left the company. We'll also do the job tracking for you as well. So where's the missing pieces of someone that used to be your champion that just left that you should know about, because now there's white space in that deal, but also implies a new opportunity and where you could go to next. It's kind of this entirely dynamic, evolving view of where you are, where you're not, where you need to be, and then where you can go next. And so to your point, I mean, you shouldn't be spending all that time because you're already spending the time. It's already in your touch points. It's in your emails and your calls and your back and forths. Why should you have to go and paint and piece that story together from 8 different surfaces of systems of record, when you could have one system of action that just does it for you? That is centralized.
And so it's bidirectional. And is it real time also? It's real time data, or is there a refresh period where I got to wait till the end of the day for my, my org charts to update or something?
Real time, within 15, 30 minutes of that call or email or gone, anything, it'll reflect in the graph. More importantly, it'll take all the words that person has said from those calls and emails and tell you what they care about. I think this is the really core difference between Sales Nav and Centralize, which is, sure, you could pull your org charts together in Sales Nav, but what's the point of a organizational graph that you put in a PowerPoint or you have in Sales Nav if you don't know who you've talked to inside that graph? Is this names and faces? Are we at the top of that chart? Are we at the bottom? Are we in the middle? Is one of those people our champion? Are they a DM? Did they leave recently? To your point, did they work at a recent company based on their work history? Like, that is all context that tells you about the relationship, not just that there's people that are in a view in a trade.
Yeah.
And so what we've really indexed on, if anything, I'll end with on that train of thought. It's that, you could do all the word mapping in the world. You can make a PowerPoint and whatnot, but what's the point of names and faces if you don't know where you're engaged? What's the point of that same list of names and faces if you don't know who's left since you made it? All these things are just workflows in the natural flow of the deal, but if they're not all there in one place, you're still stuck with that same fragmented workflow, like piecing the story together. And that's a lot of the intuition why we built it the way we have.
So how does it take like call transcripts from a Gong or a Chorus AI or something, and it pulls those in, and that's how you're getting their words, in terms of being able to start to map their profiles and say, hey, Jane IT person in this call said this and was asking these questions, and it's clear, she might be trying to figure out our InfoSec policy on XYZ, right? Or something like that.
Exactly.
Awesome. Wow. Okay. Cause I use that today, and like, we don't use Gong where I'm at now. We use Chorus, but I've used Gong a bunch in the past.
Totally.
And their AI always summarizes the calls, but they're not, in my experience, typically super actionable to where, and they're definitely not part of the bigger puzzle, as you're saying, because I might be able to look at one individual call that I had with some subset of the stakeholders and look at the notes and the AI summary of that. But what I don't have is like, how does that now map back to the broader conversation? Like, we've got IT over here evaluating, we've got InfoSec, we've got the main champion, we've got executive level folks who want this, we've got finance and procurement folks who want another thing. And how do we sort of marry all together that all of the different, talk tracks that are running on each of those fronts into one place, so we can kind of have a holistic approach to every call. I love it, man. That's wow. I'm so blown away.
You should be our head of sales, dude. That's a very good recap. I mean, that's really the core of it. It's like, where do you wake up? I mean, one of the reps we're working with one of our customers said this very well. They're like, when they first saw the demo, they said, this is the dashboard I wish I had when I started sales. It's like, where do I actually wake up and understand the story that's not just rows of contacts and names and activity in Salesforce? Because at best, and I'm speaking from a leadership perspective, I'm speaking from the rep perspective, if I'm you and you're my VP of sales, we're doing a one-on-one, you ask me, hey, how's the DocuSign deal doing? How's the DocuSign deal doing? And you just have to hope that your next steps and your close date and all this basic stuff on the op are good enough. And then you're playing this game of telephone during the call and just making sure you're covering your bases. I'm talking to these 6 people. It's fine. I'm getting on a call tomorrow. The whole time, that frontline manager, that VP of sales is like, does Jesse have happy ears? Like, who is he really talking to the right people? And you just have this like tension where you're trying to sell as a team, but you don't have the fidelity of actually what's happening on the ground to have a productive conversation. Versus if it was just so clear, like, this is where I am. Hey, I didn't even realize the VP of sales row is empty. Let's go figure that out. Oh, exact sponsorship. Wait a second. Can you help me out by sending that message so that we can figure out, I'm the quarterback throwing the passes. Like, can you help me over there? I'm going to get my solutions edge over here. I'm going to get the CEO to take a bump over here. Here's someone we didn't even realize we should pull in because that box is empty. You truly have a place of deal strategy, especially if you're selling up market. Like for the mid-market enterprise reps listening, like at least till date, for a lot of folks we talk to, you can't really wake up and have a shared place of collaboration to do that thinking. But that is what ensures that forecast you have in Gong or Clary is within 1% at the end of the quarter. It's what you're doing every day to make sure the deal is actually getting to the finish line and not getting done.
Oh man, that is so awesome. Yeah, one of the hardest things I think being a seller, and this is me speaking to the listeners who are in an account executive chair right now and listening, and this is me speaking from my own experience, is like managing internal expectations, to your point, like how I speak to my sales leadership during a forecast call and being able to, seamlessly deliver like what the actual next steps are and be very confident and articulate in how I talk about my deals. That's something that's taken me a really, really long time. And there's no tools to really assist with that except for like 20 different fragmented tools like Clary or Gong and Salesforce. And, you can go and check all those things to sort of prepare your narrative when you go into a forecast call. But this just sounds like a much easier, more seamless way to just go into a forecast. Do you even need to have forecast calls with this is the question, because now a CRO or a VP of sales can just go look at people's, they can go look at the admin level and look at everyone on the team's, deal narratives and see what contacts and stakeholders they're bringing into the conversation and what calls have been logged and what the transcripts show and all that. That's pretty crazy, man. That's really going to be a game changer, particularly again for selling to enterprise. But I think there's also use cases at the commercial mid-market level and even the SMB level, because one of the trends that I'm seeing that I've talked about on the show is that, especially in 2025, deals are getting more complicated, regardless of whether you're selling a $12,000 a year SaaS subscription somewhere or a $1.2 million SaaS subscription somewhere.
Totally.
All along that spectrum is going to be more people have to stamp the thing. That's what I've found just since like 2020. And since, even probably more recent than that, it's gotten more and more complex where more people have to get involved, more stakeholders. I think when I started an enterprise, like you'd want to get like 3 or 4 good, strong champion people pushing in your direction.
Yeah.
I'm working on some deals right now where I've got like 15 or 20 people involved.
Damn.
And they're not mega $1 million deals either. They're just, standard enterprise deals. But that's just the way things are. And I think, with the news we got today on the current macro economy, we're probably going to see more CFOs get involved over the next couple months and probably years, frankly. And then I think the other trend that I'm seeing, and I'm sure you're probably seeing too, is like this rise of solopreneurship and more lean companies that are like, hey, we need to hire one killer sales rep who's going to come in and they know a bunch of different disciplines, but they're going to have such a limited amount of time in the day because they're wearing so many hats. They need to use technology like this to be able to actually do more with less. They can't be spending their time building PowerPoints and going back and forth between SalesNav and Gong and Salesforce. They have to be able to let some things run in the background and focus in on the prep and delivering, at 150%, right? In their presentations and in their actual interactions with the buyers. So I just think you guys are you're hitting it right on time where it's like, we're seeing do more with less in the sales rep world. And then there's more in every deal because now CFO has to typically stamp everything. Now head of procurement has to get involved. Now, CIO might need to stamp something instead of just director of IT. Even for like a 6-figure annual spend, you're still seeing like these extra layers. And so I just think like sales are getting more complex and us sellers are getting, teams are getting smaller and leaner. And I think that's just the trend that we're going to keep seeing. I think gone are the days where you see big companies hire 50 enterprise account executives all at once. I mean, it's just not going to happen anymore. Now it's go join a small, 5-person startup as sales rep number 1, but you're going to have to do a ton of stuff. So you've got to figure out where you can optimize your workflow to focus in on like not doing the tedious stuff, but focusing on, nailing the important revenue generating activities.
Yeah.
Man, I could talk about this stuff all day.
Yeah. I mean, same dude. And I think you said it very well, which was that despite it being so tedious, your mapping and relationship understanding is a revenue generating activity. But the problem is at scale, how are you going to do it? Right? Like maybe at best for your top 1, 2, 3, 5 accounts, knowing that it's going to be stale, you have to revisit that collateral, you have to do the internal management of who knows what's going on. And there's such a babysitting process to even make that like operational at the scale you wish it could be. The way we think about it is like, to your point, you should be able to do that for every single account in your book of business and give that visibility to everyone in the same sweep. You shouldn't need to do that so that you can actually focus on the strategy and being human in those deals, building the relationships, and the rest should just create itself automatically. I'm on the same page completely, dude. That's kind of what the magic of AI is and can promise, especially when you have workflows that are there for a reason, but just really suck to do. But they're so valuable if you do it. Or what if you could just do it at scale? For the nonsense.
Man.
Imagine what your win rates and deal velocity would look like if you could.
This is going to change the industry in a big way. It really is. Again, you're hitting right on time when we're seeing this shift in do more with less. Every deal is now an enterprise deal, even if it's like a $15,000 a year deal. There's still going to be some, VP level person that has to stamp it.
I think there was actually a report from Sam Jacobs not too long ago about exactly that, like the buyer committee sizes. And I think we're literally seeing like what used to be, to your point, maybe 2, 3, 4 in the day back in the day.
Yep.
So even now, like mid-market, not even enterprise, like mid-market deals.
Mid-market.
30, 40K, and you're starting to have at least 5 or 6 people that have to be on the same page.
It's wild, man.
And we haven't even touched the topic of what happens at renewal for expansion.
Right. Because there's always more parties that get introduced in as a solution gets implemented and rolled out and expanded. Is there's more lines of business, more stakeholders that get involved, more owners, and so it never gets less complicated, especially at the enterprise. Like it's never gonna be like, oh, okay, we had to like pitch it to 10 different people to get the deal in the door, but now we only have one point of contact. No, it's not ever going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, you're never gonna have just one point of
You're
contact
probably gonna
for
turn that
a
deal. That's the
deployment.
direction.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If anything, you want to thread even more after they're already a customer, because you want to not, you got to manage to the churn figures, right? And so, well, man, I could talk about this all day. I know we're coming up here on time. Before we depart, I just, any words of wisdom or advice for the listeners out there, anything, additionally you want to share about the product or the direction of the company, I'll leave the mic to you. What would you like to share?
Yeah, appreciate it. I mean, this has been a blast. I could talk about this for another 3 hours, the minimum. That's just to take a little bio break, and then we'll go back at it too.
Yeah.
But no, I think the last thing I'll say is we're definitely seeing a trend here, to your point, Jesse, that doing more with less, leaning into AI, so many things that are so valuable but so tedious that now you can do at scale and really operationalize. In our case, we've chosen multi-threading. It's that focused on, hey, if you're selling up market, mid-market, enterprise, strat, relationships are non-negotiable to closing these deals. But kind of the math we were doing earlier makes it so untenable if you just had to do this all by yourself at the scale of so many people you have to keep track of, speaking their language on an individual level. Maybe one last insight that I'll share is that it's getting harder to get pipeline, right? Like, I don't know if y'all have been feeling this, but it's not easy. And so what's next? Well, maybe your pipeline could have been 5x coverage, but now it's 3 or 2. That just means you have only so many at-bats you're working with, and you just have to convert more of them. Your win rates have to go up.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Absolutely.
Relationships. It's taking those 50 ops you have and not just converting 20, but 40 of them, because you've talked to the right people, you've gotten above the power line, you said the right things, you've looped in that detractor that might have shown up at the end of the day, but you figured it out earlier because you had the deal strategy and exec sponsorship. And now you're in a position where you're exceeding your quota. You're in that amazing W2 you're aiming for, right? And that's what we're aiming for with Centralize. It's all-in-one deal collaboration powered by AI that you, frontline manager, up to your CRO, knows exactly what's happening, where you should have been, where you're not, and where you could be, so that your forecast is, within 1%. You're right on track. So yeah, if anyone ever is curious about that, I think about this all day long. Obviously, Jesse does. Always email or text away.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what's the best way to reach you? If there's, undoubtedly there's some people listening right now that want to learn more and want to get in touch with you directly. How would you suggest they do that?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I'm Rachit, Rachit at usecentralize.com, usecentralize.com.
Nice.
It's fun stuff. We've been cooking up with some really great folks. Happy to share a shout out. Like Sendoso is an amazing, happy customer. Y'all actually out there, probably a bunch of you use them for your gifting needs, and they've been seeing a ton of value too. So, happy to share about how some of our best customers use the product. Happy to just yap in general about, like, I talked to hundreds of VPs of sales and AEs at this point. So if there's even just ways I can share what I've seen work really well for some of the best sales teams out there and what hasn't, always down for a conversation if I can be helpful. So hit me up anytime. Always around to help.
Yeah, and Ratchet's super responsive, by the way, because I think I shot you a note on LinkedIn. We had connected on there, and I think I commented on a post or something, and we got connected. You turned around a message like in 5 minutes. So hit him up on LinkedIn too. Go give this guy a follow.
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. Always, that's easy to find.
Yeah.
Kataria, Centralize. You'll see me with a little relationship, like a gardener icon next to my face.
Nice. All right.
I like to say we're relationship gardeners that cultivate your customer relationships from the ground up.
Love it.
So yeah, always accessible.
Cool. And we will link Centralize's website and your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Reach out. This is a really cool product, especially if you're out there pitch into the enterprise. This is going to be a game changer for doing more with less, for decomplicating very complicated deals. Man, this is super exciting. I'm really glad you came on the show.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, dude. This is a lot of fun.
Cheers.
Cheers.